Congratulations, honey. What wonderful news.
I'm so glad.
The story of Wu is one of heartbreak, suffering, and desperate longing. From childhood, her life was marred by neglect, emotional manipulation, and a relentless pursuit of love that always seemed out of reach. Her journey, shaped by the cruel realities of favoritism, societal expectations, and a forbidden love that led to tragic consequences, is one that highlights the devastating effects of a life spent yearning for affection. A childhood stolen by responsibilities. Wu's life began in a household where gender dictated worth. Her parents, like many in their community, held a deep-seated preference for sons over daughters. Despite being the eldest, Wu was never treated with the care or respect given to her younger brothers. From an early age, she was burdened with responsibilities far beyond her years. While her brothers attended school and received the best food and care, Wu was forced to abandon her education and take on the role of a caregiver. At an age when most children were learning, playing, and dreaming, she was cooking, cleaning, and looking after her siblings. Every sacrifice she made was met with indifference. Her efforts went unnoticed, her struggles unacknowledged. Her parents saw her as nothing more than an extra pair of hands, a means to keep the household running smoothly. The lack of love and validation left Wu deeply wounded. She never blamed her parents outright, but with each passing year, she felt herself fading into the background, overlooked, undervalued, and unimportant. The feeling of being unwanted festered within her, hardening her heart against the world. A marriage without love. As Wu grew older, she saw marriage as her only escape from the suffocating reality of her childhood home. She longed for a man who would see her, appreciate her, and offer the love she had never known. In 2004, at the age of 22, Wu's parents arranged a marriage for her to Moju, a man from a well-off family. However, this union was not built on love or compatibility. It was a transaction, a means for her family to elevate their social standing. From the beginning, Wu felt like an outsider in her new home. Her husband, Moju, had been raised in comfort and privilege, shielded from responsibility by his overbearing mother, Mrs. Liu. Unlike Wu, who had spent her life serving others, Moju had never lifted a finger to help himself. He was a passive, indifferent husband, offering Wu neither companionship nor affection. The real source of tension, however, was her mother-in-law. Mrs. Liu saw Wu as an intruder, someone unworthy of her son. She exerted complete control over the household and treated Wu as a mere servant. The situation was made worse by Moju's unwillingness to defend his wife, leaving Wu completely alone. The only kindness she received came from her father-in-law, Mr. Zheng. Unlike his wife, he treated Wu with a sense of fairness and warmth. Though he rarely spoke out against his wife, he acknowledged Wu's struggles, offering small gestures of kindness that made a world of difference. A growing attachment to Mr. Zheng. Over time, Wu found herself looking forward to Mr. Zheng's presence. He was the only person in the household who showed her any respect, the only one who seemed to understand her pain. One particular moment cemented her growing affection for him. During a New Year's Eve dinner, Mrs. Liu chose to eat separately with her son, leaving Wu with nothing but a small bowl of rice and vegetables. The intentional exclusion was a cruel reminder of her place in the family. But later that evening, when Mr. Zheng returned home, he brought thoughtful gifts for everyone, including Wu. This simple act of kindness touched her deeply. It was the first time in years that someone had acknowledged her as a person deserving of care. Their bond deepened as the years went on, with Moju increasingly absent, spending more time at the construction site with his father. Wu and Mr. Zheng found themselves alone together more often. At first, their relationship remained within the bounds of propriety. She confided in him, shared her frustrations, and expressed her dreams of a different life. But as time passed, Wu's emotions grew stronger. She began to see Mr. Zheng as the man she had always longed for, someone who truly cared for her. And though Mr. Zheng was aware of the dangerous path they were treading, he found himself unable to completely pull away. The affair and its consequences. Realizing the danger of their growing closeness, Mr. Zheng made the decision to bring his son back home from work, hoping that Moju's presence would help ease the tension between Wu and Mrs. Liu. More importantly, he wanted to create distance between himself and Wu, fearing where their relationship was heading. However, Wu was not ready to let go. She found ways to see him and to speak with him in secret. Their relationship took on a new intensity, no longer just an emotional connection, but something deeper, more dangerous. In 2008, tragedy struck when Mr. Zheng suffered a severe injury at a construction site. He was hospitalized, and with Mrs. Liu unable to travel due to motion sickness, Wu volunteered to care for him. The time they spent together at the hospital changed everything. Away from prying eyes, Wu openly expressed her feelings, and Mr. Zheng, moved by her devotion, reciprocated them. Their bond, once hidden behind careful words and stolen glances, now became undeniable. When Mr. Zheng recovered and returned home, their relationship continued in secrecy. But whispers began to circulate. The villagers noticed their closeness, and rumors spread like wildfire. Though they tried to dismiss the gossip as mere speculation, the truth was becoming harder to hide. Discovery and betrayal. The inevitable moment of reckoning arrived when Mrs. Liu caught her husband and daughter-in-law in a compromising position. Enraged and humiliated, she confronted Mr. Zheng, demanding the truth. He denied everything, but the damage had already been done. The family fell apart. Mrs. Liu, unable to bear the disgrace, left the household and took a job as a nanny to distance herself. Moju, equally disgusted, took their children and moved in with his uncle. For the first time, Wu and Mr. Zheng were free to be together without fear of reproach, but their happiness was short-lived. The affair had made them social outcasts. The villagers treated them with contempt, and the weight of public shame became unbearable for Mr. Zheng. A descent into darkness. Overcome with guilt, Mr. Zheng decided to end the relationship. He realized that what they had built was not love, but a desperate illusion born from years of neglect and emotional starvation. For Wu, this was the ultimate betrayal. After everything she had endured, she had finally found what she believed was true love, only to have it taken away. But instead of accepting the loss, she turned her anger toward those she saw as obstacles, her mother-in-law and her husband. Consumed by her desperation, Wu devised a horrifying plan. If they were gone, nothing would stand in the way of her and Mr. Zheng. She obtained rat poison, intending to eliminate Moju and Mrs. Liu. Her first target was her husband, whom she approached under the guise of making amends. However, before she could carry out her plan, it was discovered, bringing her tragic story to a chilling end. The aftermath. Wu's life had been shaped by neglect, suffering, and an insatiable hunger for love. From childhood, she had been taught that she was unworthy, that she existed only to serve others. In Mr. Zheng, she found the one person who made her feel seen, but their relationship was doomed from the start. In the end, Wu's story is not just one of forbidden love, but of the devastating consequences of a life spent in search of validation. The emotional wounds inflicted upon her as a child led her down a path of desperation and destruction, one that ultimately consumed her. Her tragedy serves as a haunting reminder of the dangers of neglect, emotional manipulation, and the desperate lengths people will go to when love is denied to them for too long.